What's up, guys? Nathan here. I'm sorry if I look and sound like shit. I pulled an all-nighter for my starter video and somehow it's having like lasting repercussions, I think, because I just can't stop being exhausted. But I still really wanted to make this video because, as you probably know, I'm really into the experimental starter. I rarely like to play things that are not brand new or at least completely changed going into the new league. So yeah, that's what this video is about. I'm going to show you some of the builds I've been theory crafting, and hopefully they can get you thinking about some things that maybe you want to try. I will make one caveat though. I know a lot of you are probably excited for miners and then poison assassins, and I'm actually going to have neither of those in this video. And the reason for that is, one, miners, I'm not really sold on the mechanics of mines yet, and there's plenty of other streamers out there who are starting as miners, namely TarkyCat I think is going to be starting as a miner, so you can check those out if you want to learn more about it. But personally, I'm not really sure about the changes to mines yet, and I'd rather have somebody else experiment with them, whereas I want to sort of focus on other stuff. As for poison builds, I think poison is much safer, but I actually don't have a ton of experience with poison builds. I have experience with different dot builds, like Toxic Rain and Essence Drain, Soul Rend, that sort of thing, but pure poison is not something I've ever actually delved into, outside of Herald of Agony. So I'm going to leave that for also more experienced players. If you go check out Mathel, I think he's been theory crafting a lot of poison builds today. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of the builds I've come up with for this league. So the first build that I came up with is basically the idea of the mana stacking caster. And it's funny because I was talking about this in my starter video and I was like, GGG, stop pushing this. This isn't really a thing. It doesn't give enough damage. It's just a lot of EHP. It's just not going to be a thing, and I would rather you not make such a big deal out of it, yet they keep on pushing the archetype basically. Anyway, I think I can kind of eat my words now because I am more than satisfied with the changes they've made to Hierophant, as well as some of the new nodes like Arcane Capacitator and Mystic Bulwark and Prodigal Protection. How do you say that? Prodigal Protection? I don't know how to say that. Anyway, I'm pretty happy with how the mana stacking caster archetype looks right now. So what I decided to go for is I went Hierophant, Divine Guidance into Sanctuary of Thought, which basically rewards you for stacking metric fuck tons of mana, giving you tons of AoE, ton of damage, ton of extra energy shield. And then I went Illuminated Devotion for that free leech, as well as a little bit of spell damage and 25% area of effect. Nothing to scoff at. I wasn't sure about my last lab point, but I think Conviction of Power will be better for just overall clearing, but you might want to go Arcane Blessing for the elemental ailment immunities, which is nice, quality of life, and then of course frees up a flask slot for freeze. But yeah, you can check out the tree. Obviously, it'll be in the path of building, and I decided to go crit, sort of grab efficient mana nodes wherever I could. I think this is a nice little wheel here. One thing to note is I'm not actually using the mana stacking at its like top effectiveness. Like, we're never actually going to get more than like 30% increased effect of Arcane Surge. It's just not worth the investment, I think, when you could be dumping more points into crit or even life. And then you're also only going to probably be getting up to like 50-60% increased AoE depending on how much mana you end up stacking here. I guess this is what, 70% increased AoE right here, what I have. As far as my item choices, I did do a little bit of weird stuff. I went standard sort of wand and shield for having a nice chunk of mana and life on your shield, and then I went Cloak of Defiance, which is kind of a meme item. I think some people might argue it's better to just have a shaped chest, but because we're stacking mana and Hierophant lost its flat 150 mana, I think the plus 143, or I'm not actually sure what the rolls are. I think it's up to, yeah, between 100 and 150 maximum mana. I think that's really valuable. And it's just, Super Mom gives you that extra 10%. So we're actually taking only 50% of damage that we get hit by to our life. The rest of it goes to our mana. Then I went Essence Worm as well as Elegant Hubris Supreme Ego. And if you don't know about the interaction, that basically lets you run only one aura, but that aura has massive effect, and we're actually going with Zealotry, just a single Zealotry aura, and I'm basically counting on the massive AoE of Purifying Flame to give this build a lot of clear. And on another note, I actually mentioned this in the notes here, and I recommend reading this for pretty much any of the builds I talk about today, but you don't have to use Purifying Flame. I just know it's a really strong skill. It has a nice high base mana cost, and that's important. You want a nice high base mana cost so you can actually continually proc these things like Arcane Capacitator and Prodigal Perfection. I called that protection earlier, sorry. But yeah, this is the build. It's actually not that complicated. It's not super reliant on uniques. I do think you really need the Essence Worm. I think you really want the Cloak of Defiance, and then Zoph's Blood is good, but you can also just, you know, grab Avatar of Fire. It's right here. And then you can also just grab Mind Over Matter. It's right here. So if you don't have a Cloak of Defiance early in the league, you don't need it. Obviously, Bottled Faith, best in slot damage for a ton of builds, but I'm not going to, you know, deign to check that. Also, it says 700k DPS. I'm going to let you know this is probably way higher in reality, because this isn't counting things like, here, I made some notes here. It doesn't count Consecrated Ground, which is 100% increased critical strike chance. It doesn't count Arcane Capacitator, which is increased effect of Arcane Surge, which is an insane modifier. And it doesn't count Transfiguration of Mind, which is, for this build, it has 259% increased mana, so you'd be looking at like 125% increased spell damage, and none of that is factored in. So I'm guessing this number would be closer to like at least, you know, 850k. And that's nutty, because this build is super tanky too. Like I said up here in the notes, 8.5k effective HP with a really good sustain. It's just good. I really am pleased with how they reworked / buffed the whole mana stacking caster archetype, and I'm not super interested in starting with this because I played Purifying Flame Traps last league, but I still think it's really good, and I think people will probably be able to come up with a better skill than Purifying Flame that's going to really make this a fantastic build to start with. I think Stormcall might be really good. Anyway, that's the mana stacking Hierophant. Definitely give it like a 8 out of 10 as far as starters go. Next up, we have aptly named Probably Garbage Golems. And I say it's probably garbage, not because I think it's a bad build or anything, but because this is not a build that I think you should start with. I'm probably going to start with it, and that's just because I don't mind sort of toughing it out until I get the necessary jewels. But it's not something I would recommend, especially for newer players or players who like hate, you know, playing their build at a lower capacity while you wait to farm up necessary currency. Basically, I used Summon Stone Golem as a placeholder, but this is actually a pure physical Carrion Golem build. I know Carrion Golem was 100% designed to, I haven't made any notes yet. I'll make some notes before I put this up. I know Carrion Golem was 100% designed to support the skeleton zombie playstyle, but based on the footage I've seen, it has that frontal sort of spikes, almost ground slam attack, and then it has a really nice leap slam, and it has a really nice sort of a 1-2-3 melee frontal cone attack type thing. And I think all of those put together are going to make it a very mechanically strong golem, not just for single target damage like, you know, ice golems, but I think it's going to have very solid clear for a melee golem, which I'm hoping it's going to have a really nice middle ground between ice golems and flame golems. And then it's pure fizz. And I haven't messed with Impale. I know some people like to do Impale minions with stuff like Champion, but I think if you just run you know, Pride, Flesh and Stone, War Banner, and then you go Brutality, I think you're going to have a lot of damage. Right now we're looking at 260k on the default attack of Stone Golem. I don't really know the numbers, and I actually kind of do know the numbers because Rory posted them, but I don't really know how to properly calculate the DPS of Carrion Golem. But I'm guessing if we set the default attack of Stone Golem up, that's going to be at least like kind of similar numbers. It's probably going to be a lot more. It's probably going to be closer to like 300k, but it says 9 golems. We're not actually going to have 9 Carrion Golems. We're going to have 1 Chaos, 1 Lightning, and then 1 Stone Golem, because those actually buff the damage of your Carrion Golems, because we are Elementalist. And basically that means we're going to be having 6 Carrion Golems at around, let's just say like 350k, because we are going to be shocking with the Beacon of Ruin. So that's like 350k. Let's see what I have open here. 350 times 6. That's like 2.1 mil DPS or so. Again, this is like super theoretical, because we don't actually know 100% like what the damage looks like from a Carrion Golem, but I'm hoping that it's going to be mechanically really strong. So even if the damage is a little lower, like maybe it's closer to 2 mil or 1.5 mil, it's going to make up for it in the fact that it's just going to be jumping everywhere, have a huge frontal cone attack, and it's just probably going to be really strong. Elementalist got really big buffs for Golemancer. It already was very good for Golemancer, but now you just have golems that are immune to elemental damage, which makes them so tanky. They can just do things like stand and shaper beam, and you don't have to worry about it. And then you also get a chance to avoid elemental ailments per summoned golem. That's super easy to get 100% chance. You just get 3 golems, and we have 9 golems, so that's not an issue. And then you can also shock very reliably with Beacon of Ruin, Conflux, and then I'm going to be using Shock Nova Curse on Hit Vulnerability to really pump up the deeps. All around, it looks pretty good. The biggest downside of this build, I think, is it's not actually a great league starter. Like, I have things picked out like Primordial Chain. That's probably going to be expensive. I think there's a lot of people that want to play golems this league. Of course, the classic jewel stacking, and even then, I actually went for Ravenous Horde, and instead I had this picked out initially. Even more jewel stacking, and I think this is going to be a little bit more damage than Ravenous Horde, but Ravenous Horde makes your golems even faster because they get onslaught, so I decided to do that instead. All in all, great build, and I think it's going to be super strong, especially if you can manage to amass a little bit of currency or farm up these jewels. And yeah, I'm super excited. I'm probably going to start with this because I don't give a fuck about being poor. I don't care if it takes a while for this build to come online because I think it's going to be super good and worth it once it does come online. And you can farm waterways for level 21 golem gems. That's really cool. I'm going to talk about that in an upcoming video. But I'm really excited for this build. I don't care that it's not the intended way of playing Carrion Golem. And I think it's going to be pretty strong. So next up, this is probably coming out of left field for most of you guys in terms of what you're seeing in other starter videos, but this is a Wild Strike Raider using the unique sword Belltimber Blade. Now, the reason why I'm super excited about Wild Strike is because now with Wild Strike, well, I should probably take off this cold pen, that's cheating. With Wild Strike now, you can use combat focus jewels, which are the elemental hit threshold jewels, to limit the element that it can choose. Basically, that means you can only have it choose cold, only have it choose lightning, only have it choose fire. And in case you've never played Wild Strike, I think personally both the cold and lightning are excellent clear skills. They're really fun to play, but the frustrating thing is when you have to alternate between them, it's really difficult to scale all 3 of their damage, and then they all feel a little bit different for clearing. So the fact that you can just focus on one, in my opinion, takes this skill from like, I wouldn't even really consider making a character with it to like top tier for melee strike skills. So the reason why I went Belltimber Blades is because we're going to be locking into cold with 2 combat focus jewels. I have 2 empty jewel slots here because of that. And it basically means we're going to be having an extra 2 projectiles for each one, which is a total of 4 plus 3 has 3 base projectiles, so 7 projectiles. And it basically says Icy Wave. That's what Wild Strike calls that projectile. And it's like a freezing pulse almost. It pierces, it goes out, it deals a very good amount of damage, 185% of base damage, and I think this is going to be a really fun build to play. I know it says only 521 DPS, but that's not a huge deal for Wild Strike. If we look at the notes here for this build, I wanted to point out just a couple of things. I went Raider, and the reason for that is because I had another Wild Strike Raider that I really liked, and I didn't really feel like changing the Ascendancy. I just wanted to change some points and weapons around to make it more optimized for the cold version. Also, the cold version is going to have Herald of Ice, and it's going to have a ton of shatters, so it's going to be really fun and safe to play. I also only have 4 links here, and the reason for that is multi-strike is not properly implemented in Path of Building, so I had to make it into a jewel here. So I made it into a jewel, and we need Ancestral Call, which is also not properly implemented in Path of Building yet. So the damage is probably going to be a little bit more than this, realistically. Let's see, what else do we have here? I also chose Mark of the Elder, which is kind of a Pepega thing to do because it's not going to be easily available at the start of the league, but it's a ton of damage. I also thought Zerker would be a really good choice, just because it's a ton of damage, but Raider memes are nice. And then Avatar of the Veil is going to make you very tanky too now. You just get so much dodge from going to the Quartz Infusion Avatar of the Veil. And then this new exposure for nearby enemies means you'll be doing a lot more boss damage than you normally would. You know, this says 521. I'm sure it's a lot more like 700 or something. But yeah, overall, I think this is the better version of Wild Strike, just because cold damage in general is really strong. Shattering is really strong. Yeah, I think it's going to be really fun. If you want to league start as this, I think the main problem is a lot of the items are locked behind sort of later aspects of Atlas progression, but you can always just use, you can just use some rare swords. You could use a couple of Scavas if you wanted to. You could even run GMP for low level mapping instead. That might be a little ridiculous, but not horrible. If you're interested in Wild Strike and you're as excited about it as I am, I think you'll want to take a look at this build because it's different. It's definitely different, and you're going to be going fast, and it's going to be really fun. Next up, we have a very similar looking build, and it's almost cheating to sort of have this as a separate build from the other Wild Strike build, but instead of converting to cold and using Bell Timbers, we're actually using Hyon's Fury, I'm not sure how to say that, and we're just stacking Frenzies, and we're stacking lightning damage, and we're stacking increased lightning damage, and we're just going to have a really good time with Impulsa. Again, maybe some of these items are a little bit tricky for league starting, Mark of the Elder, but you could also just use a Tabula. I mean, it's still going to be really good clear regardless. Impulse is just going to let you have that extra pop and a little shock effect because you will be shocking pretty reliably against lower health targets, which is where I think this build is going to excel. And in case you don't know how Lightning Wild Strike works, because it is very different from Cold Wild Strike, it basically throws out an arc. But let's see, it's even better than probably current arc because it chains 7 times. That's a lot of times. And with the Helm enchant, it chains 13 times. Now, I don't think the range is really as good as maybe old Arc that had like a 50 range on how far it could chain. But just 14 chains on its own with Impulsa, you're going to be blowing stuff up. You're going to be going super fast because you're Raider. It's just good. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I just think Electric or Lightning Wild Strike is going to be a little bit more fun and unique than Cold Wild Strike, although it probably is going to be a little bit weaker. It looks like the damage is overall going to be a little bit lower the way we chose to build it without converting. We just went straight up Hyon's Fury and just started stacking lightning damage out the ass. But definitely recommend this one. Just make sure you use a Tabula or whatever until you can afford that Impulsa. It's going to be really damn fun. I promise you, if you never played Wild Strike before, both this and the cold version, super fun. Highly recommend. Okay, last up, this one I didn't really quite fill in a lot of the gear and a lot of the links and stuff. But it's basically a Cobra Lash build that gives no fucks about any of the poison-related scaling. And just takes advantage of the fact that it's basically a spectral throw with a ton of built-in chains. I think the number of built-in chains is going to be, let's see here, Cobra Lash. It has 5 chains base, which is a lot of chains. Then, to really meme things up, we're going to use 2 Touch of Anguish. That's another 2 chains right there. That means 7 chains by my maths. Gloom Fang for up to 8 chains. That's where the memes really pop in. And then, of course, we have Ricochet, which is another chain. That's 9 chains, so that's 90% more damage on the first hit when you throw those out. And basically, you're just going to play it like a spectral throw build. You just run GMP, you run Ice Bite for Frenzy Charge generation, and you just run around blowing packs up. I think this is going to be a lot more of a farming-oriented build. I think the boss damage on this is going to be ass, for lack of a better way to put it. But I think just like the Wild Strike builds, it's going to be super fun, and I think the clear is going to be nutty, like really, really good. The biggest downside of this build, especially as a starter, is the fact that to get the full conversion is you're going to need a Hatred Watcher's Eye conversion jewel, and that's going to be very difficult to come by in the start of the league. However, it's not necessarily required. The damage only goes down like the tiniest amount, 130 down to 124, and it doesn't even matter. I wouldn't even look at this damage number because I only have like a 3 link here and I haven't optimized, put any gear in or anything. But yeah, if you're interested in Cobra Lash, but you're not super interested in poison, like myself, I think this is going to be a really cool way to play it. It just is probably not the most league start friendly. I would definitely play the Wild Strike characters as a league start over this if I had to choose. But if you're really into what like Cobra Lash and you don't want to be assassin, you know, be a meta boy, you want to do something unique, I think this could be a really interesting choice. One thing I did sort of agonize over, and now that I'm looking at it, this is something I want to bring up, is I chose fast and deadly, and I'm not sure if I wanted fast and deadly or endless munitions. I like fast and deadly for the attack speed and the fact that it just caps my accuracy like that. Whereas if I go endless munitions, like, yeah, I get an extra projectile, but I need a little bit more accuracy. So maybe you'd have to do something like, I don't know, like move these nodes over to get that accuracy going, because I really like having capped accuracy now that it's like a thing. But yeah, that's really the only weird thing. Otherwise, you can check out the notes here. Oh, I did mention very Headhunter friendly. I know that's not something that's going to mean much to most people, but the fact that Headhunter scales your projectiles really hard, it's just going to be nutty. Like, I could see this being like potentially a 5-army carry build. Maybe it doesn't have like the same sort of 360 coverage as something like Tornado Shot, but it's still going to be very good. I'm going to say it's probably like Ice Shot tier, like juiced up Ice Shot tier with all of the ridiculous chains. You could even like mess around, maybe start running Fork. I also mentioned you can use Queen of the Forest and go super fast because you're Deadeye, so hitting that 45k evasion mark is not impossible, even though it would take a little bit of work. I also said maybe use Nightblade because getting a little bit extra crit is going to be nice just to make sure you're consistently shattering, which is part of what's going to make this feel good. There's just a lot to love about this build. I mean, it's basically Spectral Throw, but with a million other chains. So if anyone starts this build, let me know how it goes. I'd be interested to hear because it's definitely something a little bit more unique. I don't think anyone else is going to be playing this. So yeah, guys, thanks for checking out my video. Sorry again, I feel so under the weather and barely excited. I swear I am more excited than I seem. But anyway, those are my experimental starters. Make sure you check out my next video where I tell you the meta items you should be watching out for if you want to play the economy and get ahead. And yeah, good luck in Blight League, and I'll see you soon. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out my video. I wanted to thank my awesome Patreon supporters, Real Human, Zikarak, Squally, Zoljan, Coda, Julia, Allen, Kepler, Sparky, Kata, Fusk, Putsack, Heiser801, Olivier, Ice Dude, Ginzik, Anonymous, and Orangina. Thank you guys so much. I'm sorry I don't sound very enthusiastic, but I swear it's just because I'm dead, not because I dislike your guys' support. You know, it means a lot to me. If anyone else is interested in joining these fine folks over at my Patreon, you can check me out at patreon.com/NathanBrotherBob. I'm also on Instagram at NathanWalkerYT, even though that hasn't been updated in a while. I also have a Discord there, bottom right-hand corner, and then my my little Patreon. I don't know why you guys can see the logo. I don't have to tell you that's a Patreon logo. That's why it's there. Yeah. Thanks. See you guys soon.